Hey there, folks. Welcome again to the Crimson Chronicles podcast. This is Rick Morton. Excited to be with you today. We have an incredible opportunity today. We'll sit down with a living legend and spend some time today with Eddie Conyers. We're excited for this conversation and just can't wait to hear all that Eddie's going to share with us. Tommy, why don't you get us kicked off today?
Thank you, Rick. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Eddie Conyers to our Crimson Chronicles podcast. Eddie is well known born in Montgomery, eventually moved to Tuscaloosa, graduated high school in 1946, and after 2 years in the Navy, attended the University of Alabama, was called back into service during the Korean War, served a couple of years, graduated UA in 1954 and went to work for Allen and Jemison Hardware Company in Tuscaloosa, where he worked 26 years. And then he joined the College of Continuing Studies in the early 1980s and worked there until the early 1990s. And Eddie, that's where I met you when I worked in the alumni office. I well remember 42 years ago this month taking you to Gadsden, Alabama, to speak to the Etowah County Alumni Chapter at Nakalula Falls Kiwanis Pavilion, and you had them rolling.
Now, how long did applause go on after I
left? Well, they're still talking about it. It's been 42 years. That's when I first got to know you that year. I bet you talked to more alumni groups than anybody in the history of the University of Alabama.
Tommy,
your years.
May or may not believe this, but I've spoken to 107 towns in Alabama, mostly alumni offices, alumni chapters, but there have been football banquets and things like that, red elephant clubs, but 107 towns in Alabama.
Man.
Well, I know you're great. And then, of course, you're known far and wide as the Alabama practice official since 1962. You were 34 years old at the time, and you're now 96 years old. Yeah. So you've been doing this a long time, Eddie.
Yeah, Tommy, a long, long time. It's been my honor and privilege to do it, too, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Tell us about how all this happened. Early 60s, Coach Bryant had been here, I guess, 4 years at the time, and I guess he was looking for an official to come out and officiate practices because he knew that the players had to get used to certain calls that were going to be made and not to hold and not to be offsides and not to have pass interference. How did all that transpire with Coach Bryant hiring you to be a practice official?
Well, he came in 58 and maybe 59 or 60. I don't really know. He got hold of a guy named Gordon Pettis. You may remember Gordon.
I remember Gordon.
He was an official in the Southeastern Conference and later became the coordinator official in the Southeastern Conference.
Right.
Anyway, Coach Bryant told Carney Lashley, who was his right-hand man, to get him an official to practice. Coach Bryant's rationale was, if we get penalties, let's get on the practice field rather than the ball game. Now, at that time, I don't know whether anybody ever did that or not. But anyway, Gordon went 1 or 2 years, then he moved to Chattanooga and went to work for a company called Athamed. Well, Carney called me trying to find Gordon. And when I told him Gordon had moved to Chattanooga, Carney had panicked because Coach Bryant had told him to get an official. And you didn't tell Coach Bryant I couldn't get it done. So he asked me, he says, any other officials in Tuscaloosa? I said, well, there's one other, but he's a head coach at Tuscaloosa High School. He can't go. He said, well, I got to have an official today. Do you officiate? I said, yes, I do. I didn't tell him I'd worked one high school game, one game on the clock. And here I am going to University of Alabama. And to tell you I was intimidated would be an understatement. But if you know where Bama Jamma is now, right by the stadium, that little restaurant, that used to be
Bama Jammas.
Yeah, it used to be a filling station. Carney told me, he said, I got to have an official today. Will you come out here? And I said, yes, I will. I went in that Rama Jamma, where it used to be a filling station, put my uniform on, went to practice. And I'll never forget how intimidated I was when somebody said, Coach Bryant wants to talk to you. Now, you got to put yourself in my place. I worked 2 high school games. One of them was on the clock. Here I am going to talk to Bryant. I'm one of the little managers. When I got there, the little manager came up and said, Coach Bryant wants to talk to you and tell you what he wants to do. And I said, yes, sir. Well, I went up. I said, Coach, what is it you want me to do? And Tommy and Rick, to my honest to goodness, he said something that sounded like, don't you go watch them goddamn black and goddamn. I ain't got a clue. I just said yes. I heard him say offense, and I went to stay with offense. I remember Carney called me back the next. By the way, the next game we played, we didn't have any penalties. Carney called me the next day, said he wants you back out here. And I told you, I can't come out there. I said, I've got a job. I work. And I remember Carney Lass's exact words to me was, that ain't my problem. He said he wants you out here, and you're going to be out here. And that's, honest to goodness, that's how it started. I went out there not having a clue what to do, but it finally evolved. And Coach Bryant wanted, you have mental penalties and physical penalties, and he wanted a presence of an official where the players knew somebody was watching them. And then mental penalties like false starts, delay of game, that sort of thing. But that's where it kind of started. And it went on to just a few weeks ago, by the way.
Well, Eddie, did he sort of shape your officiating along the way? I mean, as you were growing into the job, did he tailor you to be what he wanted you to be?
Rick, not quite. He wanted I think the presence was the main thing. He just wanted the presence of an official where the players would be conscious that somebody was watching them. I would turn in every day a thing at number 63 red is lining up off sides, and they would correct that. But just having the presence of an official was what he wanted, and that's what we did. And it seemed to work, quite frankly.
Were you the only one?
Yeah, I was the only one. I used to call scrimmages, Tommy, by myself. No wonder I'm in the strong drink. That came from a scrimmage not long ago at the stadium. I was going to the stadium about 3 weeks ago, and I tripped and fell and hit my head here. That's one of my injuries from practice.
That's probably not the only injury either, right?
Oh, no. Barry Krause nearly permanently ended me. He hit me one day, and I hadn't been the same since. But,
well, at least you're in good company.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You can't be the only one.
The only one. And that's part of it. Yes, you get hit quite a bit.
Well, Greg McElroy's flattened you.
Yeah, Greg. Well, we were in the indoor facility, and Greg kind of rolled out, and he hit me. And Rick and Tommy, I went back, and my head hit the astroturf in the indoor facility. And it didn't hurt me, but it stunned me. I look up, and Coach Saban was about 2 feet from me looking at me. And I remember I couldn't say anything. I felt like a fool. But I remember him asking Jeff Allen if I was dead. And Jeff said no. He said, well, drag him off, and let's get on with the practice. Yeah, I've been hit a few times, but that's part of it.
Well, before we get to Coach Saban, let's stay with Coach Bryant for just a minute. And, one of the things that those of us that have been around the Crimson Tide for a long time always hear about is the legendary tower. And so you got any good stories about Coach Bryant and his tower?
Dr. Brock, who was a team physician at one time, had gone to some Scandinavian countries on a vacation, and he bought a big Parker. A hook had a hood around his head with fur, and he gave it to Coach Bryant. And Coach Bryant, one bitter cold day, Coach Bryant put that Parker on, and he was on his tower, and you could look up, and all you could see was his nose sticking out, and he wasn't moving. And in those days, you could practice. Practice wasn't limited. You could practice as long as you wanted to. We kept going and going, and I remember Dude Henderson saying, "I wonder if he's asleep." I said, we'll be here forever. But that really happened. I'm not sure he hadn't gone to sleep on that tower. It was cold. And then I remember the day Joe Namath came up on the tower, and we saw this tall, skinny kind of guy, hump-shouldered. And I can remember, I said, "Who the heck is that guy?" And one of the players said, "Some guy named Namath." We later learned how to pronounce it. But I remember Joe.
Namath.
Yeah, Namath. But Tommy, we later learned how to pronounce it.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, Eddie, you've seen so many years worth of practices and players. Who's the toughest player you've ever seen at practice through all these years?
Well, I call a name you probably don't know. He was from Mobile, Alabama. His name was Bill Condon. C-O-N-D-O-N.
Yeah.
The players were scared of him.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a tough, aggressive guy. And he never was a great player, but he was a Bryant type player. He just gave everything he had, and he had a lot to give. But Bill was a really aggressive player. And of course, the Britt boys. I don't know if you remember the Britt boys from Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
Wesley and Justin, I think it was, Taylor maybe. If fist fight ever came about, I wanted the Brits to be on my side. By the way, Wesley's wife, I think it's Wesley, his wife is Katie Britt.
That's right.
She and I spoke at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes thing in Montgomery one time, and she's a very, very impressive young lady. Very impressive.
She is, and I'll say, Eddie, if you want Katie on your side, if there's a fight as well,
yeah,
because she's the smartest of the bunch. I guarantee you.
The other boys were just all those Brit boys were just if the fighting starts, I won't be on their side.
Who's the best player that you ever saw out there?
The best player I've ever seen in his position was John Hannah. Now, you got to say John Hannah couldn't have played quarterback. He couldn't throw the ball from into that wall probably over there. But at his position, he was the best I've ever seen. And he put on played in the pros, and John is known as maybe the best offensive lineman to ever play the game, college or pro. But he had great lower body strength. He was quick, and he loved to play. And John Hannah was probably the best, certainly at his position. Like you talked about Joe Namath, obviously was a great ball player, but Joe could never play offensive tackle. But John Hannah was the best I've ever seen at his position.
Mm-hmm. How about most talented player? Just overall great athlete.
Ozzie Newsom. I'm asked quite a bit. And I thought about it very objectively. I go to a lot of alumni events, and I'm asked that question, Tommy, quite a bit. So I thought about it. I don't want to give a him-haw type answer. And I thought about it. But Ozzie could have done everything. He could have kicked off. He could punt it. He could turn punts. He obviously was a great wide out. He could have played tackle. But Ozzie Newsom, I think, was the best all-around athlete I've ever seen. And so a very fine individual, too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eddie, if my count's right, you have worked with 10 head coaches at Alabama. And so you've seen a lot of different practice styles, a lot of different routines, a lot of different coaching styles. What are some of the things that come to mind when you think about the different coaches that you've worked with and maybe some of the things that stick out about them?
Well, Coach Bryant, NCAA has limited the time that you can practice now. And Bryant had unlimited time, so you have to take that into account. But Coach Bryant practiced, I think Coach Bryant took ordinary players and made them extraordinary. I think his strong point was taking a guy with 90% ability to give him 110% of that ability 100% of the time. And he was going to beat a player with 100% ability, giving 90% about 90% of the time. So he took those ordinary players and made them extraordinary. Now, Coach Saban, it may sound trite, but he believed in doing everything right. Of course, everybody believes in doing everything right. But all the little things, like if I'm here and I'm playing head up on a guy and I got to block him to the left, my first step's got to be with my right foot rather than my left foot. Little things like that. If you're playing a great receiver who receives the ball mostly over his right shoulder, then you play him to that side. In other words, you do everything right. We used to look, the officials used to love to watch Coach Saban at practice when he would show his defensive back how to hit a guy, a runner running free in the secondary, how to hit him, and he would jump at him, and he believed in doing everything right. And I think that was kind of, from what I understand, his daddy works that way. That said, when he had a filling station in West Virginia, and he would give Coach Saban the job to wash a car, and he would come out and the car was not totally clean. He would make Coach Saban redo it. That sort of thing. Maybe Stan believed in doing everything right. I've heard him say, "Do it right 5,000 times."
Yeah. Well, Eddie, along those same lines, Coach Stallings came in 1990, and many people said was a carbon copy of Coach Bryant because Coach Stallings had played for Bryant at Texas A&M and then was an assistant coach at Alabama for several years. What were the similarities between Coach Bryant and Coach Stallings?
Well, Gene, Coach Stallings had played for Coach Bryant, Texas A&M. He had coached under him at Alabama and coached against him and beat him, by the way, when he was at A&M. I think anybody that played for Bryant and later became coaches kind of followed that model, and it was just taking the ordinary player and making him extraordinary and being a great motivator. Coach Bryant was known as a great motivator, and he was.
Yeah. What have you seen recently with Coach DeBoer? What are some things that maybe stand out about what you've observed in practice?
Well, I heard the other day, is it Marty McGee?
Marty and McGee.
He's the one with
Marty and McGee.
Yeah.
He was talking.
It's Ryan McGee.
Yeah, they were talking about this very thing. And he was talking about the change in the culture of under Coach Saban, and obviously I'm not knocking Coach Saban by any chance because he was a GOAT, but it was regimented and disciplined. And under Coach DeBoer, it's been kind of light. You can feel laughter every once in a while, and it's a little different culture. But the players seem to be responding to it very well. I've really been kind of surprised, to tell you the truth. But I think he's doing a great job. And obviously, Coach Saban and Coach Bryant did great. Well, all the coaches did.
Eddie, you've had an up-close and personal experience with 12 national championship teams. Which was your favorite national championship team?
Tom, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to show this. I don't know if you can see this. That's my 92 national championship ring. I think that 92 team, you got to remember the team they beat was a heck of a football team. Miami, people kind of forget how they were. They were almost like a pro team. And we beat the living fool out of them. Coach Bill Oliver came up with a defensive plan. Coretta, who won the Heisman Trophy, but Alabama won. But that was my favorite team, I think, my championship. But the 92, I think, would be my favorite, although all of them obviously were favorites.
Yeah, that's the year I was ticket manager, or one of the years I was ticket manager. And that's my favorite also. Just a wonderful continuity and togetherness and a drive and determination and Miami had beaten us three years earlier in the Sugar Bowl, and I think some of the seniors on that team remembered that. Obviously, it affected them on game day.
Well, I remember the first time they punted and we had a great return. I got thinking, we're going to win this ball game. And then Brother Oliver had come up with a great defensive plan, and Alabama was really into it. That was a great ball game. And we were playing one heck of a good football team in Miami. We didn't just beat them; we beat them decisively.
Here you go, Eddie.
Oh,
what?
There you go.
Yeah,
I knew
it is right there.
We got it. That's the very same ring.
Yeah.
I feel left out, y'all. That doesn't seem fair.
Well, we're gonna let you look at it.
I know. You might even let me hold it if I'm really nice, but we'll see. But So Eddie, one of the things I've heard is that Coach Saban was like he really had an opinion about your officiating ability. Let's say that he maybe expressed that to you. What did Coach Saban think about your officiating?
My daughter told me when we talked about this, I said they might ask me that. And she said, "Don't you dare say this, but I'm going to do it anyway." He told me I was the second best official in the United States of America, so everybody else was tied for first. Yeah, by the way, when A.J. McCarron, talking about Coach Saban, when A.J. McCarron was there, A.J. and I would go back and forth at each other all the time. Well, you don't ever do anything. I hear you standing around. It was kind of a daily routine thing. Well, I'm coming out to practice one day, and the team was warming up. And I heard AJ say, "Well, it's about time you got here. You don't ever do anything. You just stand around and hit." And I shot him a prodigious bird. Well, later on, the players came up to me and said, "Man, you know what you did?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You shot that bird." I said, "Yeah, old McCarron." He said, "No, that was Saban that said that."
Oh boy.
But my estimation, those guys went way up when I did that.
It's amazing.
I mean, how much interaction did you have at practice with these players? Like, if you called pass interference on somebody, would they get on you pretty good?
No, Tommy, the players didn't, but the assistants did. Like Donahue.
Okay.
Boy, you call a penalty on the defense, Donahue go crazy. You call a penalty on the offense, Mal Moore would go crazy. But the players, you're so much interact. I interacted with Dabo quite a bit. You know, Dabo was a walk-on, and
Right.
he was not a scholarship player, but he would come out wide as a wide out, and I'd be on the end of the line. I remember telling him, I said, "Dabo, if you've noticed when you come out here, nobody can come cover you." I said, "You ain't important at all." But I've had relationship with Dabo and, of course, related pretty well with Joe, Joe Namath, Kenny Stabler. If a lot of people have asked me if it's 4th and 2, and you got to have it, who do you want? And I want Kenny Stabler. Now he might run the wrong way, and I don't know what's going to happen, but he's going to make it. He was just that kind of player. Kenny was a great player, obviously.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, did you go to the games at Bryant Denny and Legion Field and even some road games?
I did to start with, Tommy, but I got over the years, I got to where I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I have a friend of my wife, who had one of the largest boxes there at Bryant Denny Stadium, and be invited out there, and they would be partying and laughing, and I'd be so into the game, I wouldn't relate well to these people, so I just kind of stay away from it. Ideally, if Alabama played a big ball game, people would leave me alone. I'd get in my car and ride somewhere. Every once in a while, I'd turn the radio on and listen to it. I'm kind of chicken that way, but I reckon I'm too into it. I just feel for them, but those guys know how hard they work and how much it means to them, and I just can't stand for them to lose.
Wow. Folks understand that too, right, Eddie? That
Yeah,
like I
I
think
think so.
folks
I think
folks that really live and die by the tide understand the passion. I'm curious because one of the things that's happened over the years is you've really kind of become almost an ambassador for Alabama football over the years through the role that you've had as a practice official for all those years. Who are some of the people that you've met along the way or experiences that you've had as a result of the role that you've played with the program all these years?
well, a lot of the assistant coaches, McElwain, Dude Hennessy. Dude was I took a course at the university. After I graduated from university, about 25 years later, I wanted to go back to the university. Why, I don't know. I was never a real good student. But in professional development, they say there are 4 types of people. You got a dominant person, you got an instigator, you got a steadfast, and you got a compliance. And dominant Saban, Bryant, Vince Lombardi, Woody Hayes, they were dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And you have instigators like Dude Hennessy, who was a kind of a personal fella. I mean, everybody loved him.
Yeah.
He laughed and so forth, but don't ever doubt he wasn't tough as nails. Then you have
Yeah.
a steadfast, and I think that's what happened with people like kind of like Dubose, Coach Dubose. He was not a dominant person, but he was a steadfast. He would be a great coordinator, but not
Right.
a head coach. I think, and Mike's nobody in the world loved the University of Alabama more than Mike Dubose. But I think he kind of fell into that kind of area where he would be a great coordinator rather than a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
But I stopped and think of all these coaches I've seen over the years, and it's really kind of nostalgic.
Eddie, you may remember I worked with Dude in the Tide Pride office for many years, and boy, he was a hoot. Now, customers would love to come in and talk to Dude. I loved him.
When he coached at Kentucky as a high school coach, they had a guy named maybe Jones who was everybody wanted Jones to play. And the stands all say, "We want Jones." And Dude said, "Jones, get up in the stand. They want you back. I don't want you."
That's great.
And he was assigned. Coach Bryant used to assign games to players, to coaches. Donahue used to always have Tennessee games, and Sam would have the Baldwin game. But Dude was assigned the Georgia Tech game the last time they played. And this might be a little bit raunchy, I hope not. But anyway, Dude was assigned that game, and his folder on Georgia Tech was about this thick. He had everything about every player. Coach Bryant wanted that game more than any game. But we coming off the field on Thursday, and I went up to Dude, and I said, "Dude, you're not a little tight, are you?" He said, "I think it'd be safe to say that's constriction of the anus." I don't know why I remember that. I apologize if that's tasteless.
Well, Dude used to tell the story. I don't know which Southern Cal game he was scouting, whether it was the 70 game or the 71 game. He went out to L.A. to scout Southern Cal and ended up having dinner with Jim Neighbors and Francis Bavier, who played Aunt Bee in the Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah.
And several of the Andy Griffith characters having dinner with him one night because Jim hosted him when he was out there because at the time he was filming Gomer Pyle, USMC. Dude had stories absolutely unbelievable. I just wish I'd had a chance to get them all down in a book because it would have been priceless.
Oh, yeah. Dude was a heck of a coach.
Yeah.
He related well to the players. He kept things light, but don't ever doubt he wasn't tough as nails. He was a good coach. Good coach. And a great guy.
Well, I told Rick earlier, Eddie, that I worked with Peggy, your wife, in the ticket office for several years. And I just wanted to talk about Peggy a little bit. How and when did y'all meet? And I think you were like 21 and she was like 16. Is that right?
She was, Tommy, the first years ago, they had a high school championship game between South Alabama and North Alabama. They don't do it anymore. They did it 2 or 3 years. And the first year they did that was the year I got out of the Navy. And I went over to watch them practice over at Martha Parham West, if you can know about where that is. I went over there to watch them practice where Peggy and 4 or 5 of the majorettes, she was a majorette at Tuscaloosa High School, came by there to have their picture made with some of the players. And I gave them a ride to 2 or 3 of the majorettes back in time. And that's where she looked up and met me. She hit the jackpot right there. But it's kind of unusual right there where they practiced, and was the first time I ever met Coach Bryant and my wife. It's kind of unusual. Right there. It's I can't think of the name of that building now, but it's across from Farrah Hall on University Boulevard. Of course, that field now is taken up by buildings.
Yeah. Well, y'all been married 75 years. What's your
Yes.
secret?
Well, she does what I tell her, and then I go out and do it.
Okay. Let me write that down.
Yeah, we have been married 75 years. Not many people that do that.
That's amazing.
Right. Well, Eddie, you are a legend, and the contributions you've made to Alabama football over the years, I think one of the most fun things that we've been able to see is how that's been recognized and the way that you've just become such a beloved figure to all of us that love the Crimson Tide. And man, we're just very thankful for you. And it's been one of the best things that Tommy and I've done so far in this Crimson Chronicles podcast to have a conversation with you.
Well, it's certainly been my pleasure, Rick, and I appreciate you saying all that. And it's been almost unbelievable, but why me? Because I was nothing. I was not really all that good an official, and but somehow that everything kind of evolved around. But it's been a real pleasure for me, and I'm tremendously proud of it.
Well, Eddie, I got one more question for you. You've lived an incredible life and have been blessed to be inside the ropes, so to speak, of the greatest college football program in history. By my count, you have interacted with more than 2,500 or so players, coaches, managers, trainers, and other staff members through these 60-plus years. I can't comprehend the memories you have, the joy that you've spread to so many people, the smiles you've given people. I mean, like just in the last few days, people would ask, who's your next podcast? I said, well, we're going to interview Eddie Conyers. And they just smile and say, oh, he's got a lot of stories. He's a wonderful guy. You're a true icon in Crimson Tide history. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm reading your obituary. How long are you going to keep this up? How long are you going to keep being our practice official?
Well, what I do now is we have to have, by the way, we're not practicing this week. I don't know why, but we don't do any practice this week. I think the players do kind of walk through.
Eddie, are you sure they just didn't tell you that they're not practicing?
Do what now, Rick?
I said, are you sure they just didn't tell you they're not practicing?
Come figure, that could be it. But what I do now, I really don't. I have to furnish 4 officials every day. And that's hard to do because we've only got 6 here in town. And I've got 1 that comes out of Birmingham every day. But to get 4 competent officials, now I could get bodies, but to get competent officials, but we've got a pretty good group that go out there and they do a great job. But I just go and see that they're there, and I keep up with who's there and how to pay them and that sort of thing. But it's been a pleasure for me to do, and I enjoy doing it.
Well, Eddie, if you ever need an incompetent official, then I'm your man. Just give me a call. You know how to get a hold of me, and I'll be right there for you.
You fit in well with me. You're the second. You're the 3rd best official in the world.
Oh.
Wow, I'm not sure that the math is mathing with that. But man, Eddie, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And just want to say thank you for spending time with us on the Crimson Chronicles podcast. We're thankful for all the folks that continue to join us every week and are a part of this. We just want to remind you out there, we would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and give us a comment. Tell us how much you enjoyed Eddie and how much you want us to have him back. We'd love to hear that, or whatever it is that you want to say to us. We want to hear it and we want to interact with you, because that's part of what we're trying to do here, is to build community around folks that love Crimson Tide athletics. And so thank you for going on the journey with us. And Eddie, as we finish up every podcast, we try to finish things up the best way we know how, which is to give everybody a hearty Roll Tide. So Roll Tide.
Thank you.
Roll Tide.
Thank you for having me.